Welcome back to the Arabella Block of the Month by Wing and Prayer Designs. We are on block number 5, the Hourglass Star. Are you ready? Let's get started. Well, welcome back to another awesome tutorial. My name is Rob Appell. We call the show So Well with Rob Appell here at Stitchin Heaven in Quitman, Texas, and I'm super blessed to see all of you out there following along, or maybe welcome to Arabella Block of the Month by Wing and a Prayer Design. We are on block number 5 this month. This is the Hourglass Star, and if you're like me, you may have found the last couple of months a little complicated in the patchwork, and so you'll be happy to have a little break this month. This month we are making 4 blocks. I have a couple on the wall to make sure that I was practiced and ready for the instructions today. I have a couple of more in the process right here, and it's going to be a very simple construction block and very simple layout with just one little switcheroo we'll talk about when we get over into this little section here. So it's going to be really fun. Oh, and we have something fun to work on today that's actually new to the video and something we don't do very often, which is some fussy cutting. So we're going to talk about that as well as we get started here. Make sure you have your pattern handy. Of course, there are beautiful color diagrams here, and we are using the Timeless Treasures fabrics that are by Wing and a Prayer called Arabella, so the fabrics in the booklet match the fabrics from your kit from us here at Stitchin Heaven. If you're just participating and following along by watching the videos, maybe you have a kit from somewhere else, again, welcome. I hope these instructions are really helping you. We are sold out of the kits at this point, but we will probably do this again. So again, we believe this is great content, and we're just happy you're with us today. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. We have basic cutting instructions that we can refer to, but we've done that in most of the other videos. So we're really just going to look at the single page block 5 instructions here as we get going. And your cutting diagrams, as a quick reminder, they just run across the top here, and everything through here is business as usual. Stuff we've covered in the last 4 months before, until we get down here to fabric number 10. Fabric number 10's got these big, beautiful, I think maybe like a Gerber daisy batik. And at any rate, we're going to go ahead and do some 4.5 inch square fussy cutting. So let's go ahead and just start in on that right now. That's going to be the key, having all of our fabrics cut and prepared before we get started. When it comes to fussy cutting, we're going to want a square that is at least the 4.5 inches. And technically, that's about the only time in the world I ever want the exact same right size tool. Normally, you'll hear me say bigger is better. But what I'm trying to get at right now is it would be great if I knew exactly where my 4.5 inches were. So you might want to put a little tape or something like that around the perimeter. But nonetheless, and you can see I've already cut the 3 that I've used. So we're just going to cut this last one here. And what I really want to do is give myself roughly a 1/4 inch around whatever design I'm trying to capture. So I'm going to make 2 cuts at once, and then I'm going to clean up the other half. So right now I'm looking, and I can see there's a 1/4 inch of design spared and at least a 1/4 inch of design spared here. But then I also want to come down and see, where's my 4.5 and my 4.5. It's way over here. So that really means I can shift this more to give myself roughly a 1/2 inch of the design within the perimeter. Okay, then once I have that the way I want it, I'm just going to get my hands safe, and now I'm going to go ahead and cut. And being aware, there's another one I could use, so I don't want to just go rambling through here. I want to kind of get a nice cut close to what I'm going to use. And I'm going to go ahead and cut through here. Now this flower's already been chopped off, so to get myself making life a little easier, let's just go ahead and clear that out of the way. Then I can rotate it so that it's more of the tool we're used to. Drop this down to our 4.5 inch square and our 4.5 inch. Just always, right? Safety cover works. That's cool. Okay, here we go. 4.5 by 4.5. This is the last daisy, so I want to really make sure I'm measuring twice and cutting once. Okay, 4.5, 4.5, and I'm lined up here, and then I've got everything I need within. It's a little close on this side, so technically, folks, look, I can actually slide this down over here, and I can slide it up over here. Okay, I was so busy trying to get it lined up perfect that I actually overshot, so I'm going to actually just double cut this one. I'm going to cut it here, bring in myself all the way clear, okay? And then again, rotate to make sure that I have exactly my 4.5 and my 4.5 as I want it, so that when I piece in the outer edges, I don't consume any of the design. Okay, so always watching for at least 1/4 inch, if not maybe a little bit more. Make sure you save your scraps. They may come in handy. I know down the road that we have lots of piecing to still do. All right, let's get back into today's video. So you will need 4 of those center parts. That's the center square that you see right here being used, fabric number 10. But until the rest of our half square triangles and hourglasses are made, we're just going to set these aside over here. Okay, so as I dive in again here to our instructions, the first group of instructions today is going to just focus on the making of our half square triangles. We have a couple of different groups. We have our fabrics. Now I have this labeled as 1. I keep thinking it's 2. This is fabric 1. So I have fabric 1 and 4, and then we have fabric 3 and 4, a little bit more medium tone combinations. These are going to be done as we have been doing so many throughout the project, is we have a diagonal line drawing from tip to tip. We're going to go ahead and match these up. And we're going to go ahead and sew 1/4 inch on either side of that line. At the moment, my seam guide is in the way, so I'm just going to move it completely out of the way. And I'm going to use that chalk and the presser foot to sew down. Now, of course, you can chain piece these. If you're new to quilting, that means do many of these before you stop to go on to the next step. We're just going to do 1 of each pieces as we go along so we can get the blocks built fairly rapidly today for your video. You have these that are going to be called, let's call these the smalls, and then you're going to also have larger ones that will become the hourglass ones, right? So we can chain piece the smalls and the larges, and so let's dive into the next set, which are the CDEs. This happens to be one where I'm using my fabric 8, and then the fabric 5, you can see, well, probably easier if I just do that, right? There's your fabric 5 there. So now, same thing. Chalk line across there. So while you're setting all of these up, go ahead and do them all. Of course, I do my smalls first and then my larges, but either way, if you're chain piecing half square triangles, what you want to do is all of the sides at once. Cut your threads. I like to use the thread cutter on my machine to actually separate them. And then I rotate them all. I actually stack them up so that it's efficient while I'm working. And then I come back in here and I sew down the other side of that chalk line. So you're technically going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side of that chalk line. And if you were chain piecing like I recommend, you would then do all of your smalls and then you would do all of your larges again. We do have a little bit of a change coming, and it's clearly stated in the instructions. Wonderful, wonderful instructions by Wing and a Prayer. And they have several block of the months available out there. We just happen to be sold out right now of the Arabella, but there are many that we offer by them. I recommend Tonga Canyon coming up, of course. Now, what we're going to do on our smalls, we are going to both trim, or I should say slice them open. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take something like a slotted trimmer, block lock, whatever you like, and we're going to trim these down to 2.5. Okay, so for right now, I just want to do, and this is for all of our small combinations. Okay, and I like to just on these smaller ones, just kind of do it manual here. Make sure my iron is getting warm. Now on the large ones, when we go to cut those large ones open, we are not going to trim them. We are just going to go ahead and we're going to do them a little bit opposite. So with my slotted trimmer, I do all of my trimming before I do any of my pressing, right? When I go to do this round, what we're going to do, and you always want a ruler that's longer than your diagonals, okay? And this is just mostly for safety versus accuracy, but you don't want to cut your threads. Again, slice this open now, and now what we're going to do for these larger units, right? We're prepping here, and that's why it says real large, do not square, do not square. We're going to press these over to the fabric number 8. Okay, so that's this wonderful purple fabric. So we're going to do that first. We're going to press those over. These are untrimmed, so we still have a little work to do. on these wonderful big units, and this is what's going to form into our hourglass units. Now our small ones, we're pressing to the fabric 4s, and these ones have already been trimmed accurately down to the 2.5. So now what you're going to want to do is set these in like directions, and we're going to come back to those in a moment after we complete this next portion of the trimming. So I'm just following the instructions as we go along here. So the next portion of the trimming, we need to make another cut across here. And what I am going to try to point out is having my ruler running along the seam is almost more important than having this tip to tip, because these are still going to be trimmed down. So having a nice perpendicular seam in there makes a beautiful hourglass. So the first thing I'm going to do, hopefully you can see that big broad line, is the broad line is going to drop on top of the seam allowance. And now I'm doing my best to go tip to tip, but if it's not exact, it's okay, because when these match up later on, we're going to go ahead and be able to trim them down. Okay, so we want to do this to all of these larger squares that are half square triangles right now. We're going to splice them and slice them, and or maybe we're actually going to slice them and then splice them technically. Okay, remember, nice and perpendicular across there. Okay, and then you're also going to notice you've got these kind of different, when you rotate them, right, they're going to have these different directions. So when you go to match them up to the different pieces, you're going to have different instructions, but you're matching them, making sure that your fabric 8 is on opposite sides to create that pinwheel effect, right? Okay, those are going to match up like that. And we'll actually go ahead and do those sewings down here in the next step. But while I have them on the table, I am just going to kind of roughly place them together and teach you a few more tricks as we get to those in a moment. All right, hopefully you're all still hanging in there. Let's get into these corner units. There's going to actually be 3 different ones we're building, and that's really the trick here. So the whole block, like I said before, is very easy construction. With your hourglass units, there's your fussy cut, and it's these pieces that are actually the same as these, but they're just made differently, and having the greens, that's a mirror image. So we're going to want to really focus on the placement of these greens here and the way that it all comes together. And the other difference in this, actually, when we come into the construction, and I'll remind you in a few minutes, is we have our fabric 1 here and fabric 2 here, and it's only in this. So that's why I build my cornerstones on that, to keep all of that straight. So that's what we're going to dive into now, and you really want to just build these on the table as you go. Okay, so we want to use our fabric, our diagrams, all of this, and I'm going to start with a fabric 4 here up in this upper corner. Okay, and then my fabric number 1 down in my lower corner, following that diagram. Okay, and then what we want is we want these to come in here and touch. I think it looks like a little fish or a starship for all of you geeks out there, or nerds. I think nerds is a cool term nowadays. It wasn't when I was in high school. Ask me how I know that. Anyways, here we go. And then I'm just going to fold these over. And I'm really just going to do these block by block. There's a little quicker way to do it, but you might get confused. And before we can go any further here, we do really want to put on our seam guide. And I like the little wash or the seam tape, but I love my seam guide because I can't overstitch it, but I'm using that to make sure I keep lining it up at the same point. Let's make sure I didn't get myself confused. Okay, and what I was going to actually point out is when you rotate these, like so many other patchworks, you can kind of notice it's a solid square against the same directional triangle. Okay, but because we're dealing with different fabrics, it's probably easiest just to go ahead and manually do these Noah's Ark style 2x2. So drop your presser foot. I want to make sure I've got my needle down now so that as I stop throughout, and again, chain piecing, no problem, as long as you don't get lost in where you're working. Okay, so I'm going to fold these over and come on in, but I'm not going to go any further than just these 2. We'll cut the thread here, and now as the instructions call for, we're going to press into the square. So away from your half square triangle, and partly this is to help our seams nest in a few minutes, but also it's just really good sewing management, helping you with your precision and your passion and all of that. I'm hoping you noticed early the silliness of the shirt. It is working, but not 100%, so I want to be appropriate. It is definitely bringing passion to my quilting, but I don't know that it's bringing passion to my precision. Starship's coming back together, folks. Let's go ahead and rotate this now, and those blocks and those seams are going to nest up real nice. Okay, another 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's all 1/4 inch seam allowances. I don't even know why I say that anymore. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and press this over. And these really are multi-directional. You can turn them however they need, and you will actually be utilizing 2 of these per block as well. Okay, so that's that first one. That's that corner number 1. Now we're going to do corners 2 and 3, and that's where they're the mirrors, and that's where we bring in our fabric 6s. So let's just start here with corner number 2, and we're going to put up fabric 6, and we're going to put down fabric 4 like this. We have 2 different half square triangles being used. We have the first combinations, and then we have the combinations with fabric, the 3 and the 4. Remember, your fabric 4s are going to normally touch as they come together, and I'm actually using the lightness and the darkness of the diagram itself to confirm that I've done that correctly, because they are laid out in a gradient fashion as well. Okay, same thing. Just going to go ahead and lay this over. Now our fabric 6 square on top. And we'll do the same to create that corner number 3, but it's going to be done in the opposite layout, so we'll do it together. We're not in a rush. This is the beauty of having these wonderful free tutorials, right, to sew along with. We've got all month to get our homework done, and I hope these videos are helpful for you. Again, pressing over into the square away from the half square triangle, just for ease of use. Okay, and let's not get going so fast though that we forget what we're doing. We don't want to do that, right? Squares opposite each other, starship, a little harder to see, fold it over, and just match up that center seam. Okay, so that is corner number 2. And I don't know if there's a right or wrong direction to press them at this point. Okay, so I'm going to lay that on the table as we see it in our instructions, right? Okay, and now here comes the next one. So corner number 3, and that one now has the fabric 6 down here, fabric 4 there. Okay, and then the lighter of the 2 in the bottom, darker in the 2 in the top. And keeping in mind, you have 4 of each of these to do, and you have 8 of the other corner to do. I mentioned this in one of my new videos recently about the top 5 tools every quilter needs. This is one I didn't have for a million years, and I love the wool mat. But I did get a couple questions about what would be alternative choices for folks that are desperately allergic to wool. I don't know. I wish I did. And it's funny because I think I'm allergic to wool, but it doesn't seem to bother me when I work around it. But I don't think I'm super allergic. I just won't wear it. Okay, so all of the base patchwork is done down to the making of our hourglass blocks. Okay, so now we're going to find our combinations down here, but really it's going to using this fabric 1, multiples, and then we have our fabric 2 and a few of those as well. I don't want to get these confused. Let's go ahead and lay those separately in their mirror fashion over here. Okay, and then we're going to bring these together. And as a reminder, each one of these is going to go ahead and match so that your fabric 8s form the hourglass. You're going to fold this over like yay. nest the seams. And go ahead and stitch all of these chain piece style. Keeping a nice accurate 1/4 inch. Taking a moment to wiggle that as needed. These will be trimmed down. Do your best here though. After your hourglass blocks have been stitched together, and we mentioned this in the last month's video because I made a mistake. This is a trim down to 4.5 inch situation, and we really want this to stay centered. So what I was teaching in the last video was using my 45-degree marker, lining this up with my actual diagonal, and then I was finding what was 2 1/4 inches because I need a 4 1/2 square. So my center needs to be 2 1/4, and I was trimming here like this and like this. Okay, and this works as long as you're really paying attention nicely. Rotate it around like you always have learned before for cutting 4.5 by 4.5 half square triangles. Now, as I watch my diagonal run through the tool, I can see I've got a perfect corner, 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 so nothing has gotten set incorrectly. Everything's been rotated correctly. Okay, and this works real nicely and accuracy, and I really am happy with the results. But I just had this idea while I was working through some of those, and so I left one of these unpressed, and I did it already to confirm. I had never noticed this before, but folks, I believe using your slotted trimmer is a much more efficient way. When we pressed these together, we made sure that our seams were really nice in the center as we were stitching. So now we can actually use that seam allowance as we've been taught, 4.5 inches. But now what I'm confirming also is that there's a center line right here. So if that center line goes right up the thread, it needs to go up the thread, folks, because that's where your seam really is. So line up your stitches, and your stitches, oops, sorry, we need 4.5. I thought that looked kind of incorrect. Okay, so stitches and stitches, 4.5, and then watch. All I have to do here is slice once, twice, and with my big heavy cutter, I do like to just kind of do these outside of the slots, right? But then, now as I come over here and press, ready? You ready for my punchline? This is going to be impressive. Right? Boom. Look at that. They're perfect. So I hadn't ever used the slotted trimmer, and last month I got myself into a slotted situation, but this is great. So anyways, hopefully we all just learned something well together, and you'll trim down all of your units, whether they have the fabric 1 or the fabric 2 in them, and then we're ready for construction time. Okay? So like I was starting to say earlier, we build our centers using our wonderful fussy cut centers, as you can see here. All right. What I found was easiest is we're always going to match up that dark fabric down there. I believe that is our fabric number 5. We're going to touch those first. Okay. That's the same on all of the blocks. So I suggest that we make this seam next. It's technically kind of the top and bottom of the block, but it's just the same whether we do side by side. So I'm just going to stitch on one side, and again, you're doing 4, and this is a simple section, so you could chain piece these, but mine are already on the wall. So I'm just going to grab the other side. Plenty of place for our pressing here in a second. And because it's the center block, center row, we're going to press towards the center square. Okay, so I'm pressing in towards our fussy cut, and in towards our fussy cut. Okay, then you're going to end up with your other fabric 2, like you see here. Sorry, I keep saying fabric 2. It's fabric 1, folks. I apologize. They're very similar in tone. But you can see it's on top, bottom, and over here on this left-hand side. Okay, so that goes there. And then we're going to use more of our standard, and they're just going to fill in with those fabric 4s touching. Okay, so again, you can do multiples of these together, just the same, because this isn't going to change. The only one we have to pay attention to is that right-hand side with the mirror image blocks. Try to sew right through your 1/4 inch there for a nice point. Rotate that around, make sure we still have all of our directions as they should be. Grab this. This is an outside block, right? So now, and we press to the center, so now we're going to press to the outsides here, and I hold it up and press to the outside there. Okay, so that's going to go together just like that. If you want to, you could just go ahead and secure that now. Nestle up those seams. Account for any fudge factor necessary. Do your best to catch that seam, that point there. You've got some nice corners coming in by getting our thread right through. Oh, and then I fold it over, but it won't change the seam on the other side. Line up my corners. And now I'm going to press away from the center here. Okay, folks, and as a reminder, using that fabric number 2, okay, it goes, making sure, again, the lights are facing outward. We have the rest of our units to come in here, and the check is now that those medium tones are going to touch more into the block, right? Or the light tones are going to follow around where the light tones were as you see them here in the follow around, okay? So again, let's just go ahead and secure the squares to the squares first as we build this row. And of course, you could build all 4 of these rows the same because you're doing the same for these. They're just different than the rest. As you get ready, just rotate, rotate, making sure those green or your fabric 6s are in those opposite corners. Pressing away from the center again to prepare for that nesting. Okay, and there we have it, folks. As you can see now, 4 completed Arabella block number 5, the Hourglass stars. And these are beautiful, and I sure hope you found these to be a little bit less challenging than last month, at least it was for me, of course. Next month should prove to be about the same. We're going to have a really fun, another multicolor, a change in tone, a change in shade. Make sure while you store these, you pay attention to where you have that fabric 6, those mirrored blocks, so everything stays correct for you in your stash. We're just going to set these aside and relax until we get all of our wonderful fabrics for month number 6. I will see you then, if I don't see you before, with one of our other fantastic tutorials or maybe one of our live Friday afternoon shows. Folks, thanks again for being here. Thanks for being part of our Arabella block of the month and our Stitchin Heaven sewing community. Till I see you next time, folks, please stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.